Welcome to the comparison video between the ToLiss A319 and the Flight Factor A320. Right now we're sitting in the A319. Right now I'm just going to go over the McDo differences. So right off the bat I can see that if you look in the 3D cockpit here, this McDo is actually a more modern McDo. This is what's most commonly seen on the 320s and 321s, and we are retrofitting our 319s to have this McDo, so it's not inaccurate by any means. My only problem with this is when I click for the 2D pop-up, I now have a different McDo. As you can tell, here I've got brightness knob, here I've got my bright and dim buttons. So, not a big deal. Obviously, it does the same exact thing. It's just a little pet peeve of mine. You know, you want to play with the big boys. Let's get consistent across the board. Also, as I click buttons, you hear that? I don't know what kind of sound that is, but it sounds like you're banging on a metal drum. That's not very good. In the comparison of the McDos here, you can tell I'm in the Flight Factor Airbus A320 now. And you could see right off the bat that the McDo down here in the 3D menu, or I'm sorry, in the 3D cockpit, is the same as the pop-up, which is good. The sounds, I am using BSS sounds, but the push buttons sound much better than the ones in the ToLiss. Those are the first two things I noticed right off the bat. Going through my initial setup here, another thing that came to my attention was this alternate company route right here. This should not be amber boxed. Now, granted, depending on which software version they try to model, it may have been way back in the day. Maybe one of you guys can correct me on this, but I do not recall ever seeing this alternate company route requiring any input. What an amber box means to us in the McDo is that is something that needs to be filled out before you can take off, or essentially before you can load anything complete. You need to have, all the amber boxes need to have information. So that makes, you know, it's not really a big deal. You could just put in a fake alternate or whatever. That's just another thing that I noticed in there. Going to the initialization page 2, when you initialize the fuel prediction, the zero fuel weight CG and zero fuel weight are backwards. Okay, so you should have 56.3 over here and then your CG on the right. So kind of confusing there right off the bat. It took me a minute to figure that one out. These are flipped. They need to be on the other sides. This is good. Block. Put that in. Everything else looked pretty good. I was a little disappointed to find out that the secondary flight plan function is not modeled in the ToLiss 319. I know it's not complete aircraft yet. Maybe they're working on it. I hope they are. It would be really nice to have that secondary function available. If you're not familiar with the secondary flight plan, essentially it's just another flight plan entry that you can use. You can build whatever you want in the secondary. For real-world procedures, we take for instance, if right now we're departing out of Seattle, what we would do was put in the ILS back into Seattle in case we bang an engine or something departing and we need to come back. We can just, boom, activate the secondary flight plan. We have everything set up. We don't have to do any setup to come back into our airport. It's already in the secondary flight plan. So that's really handy to have in the real world if something goes wrong, or you know, you're making modifications to your flight plan en route. It'd be nice to have it modeled. I'd like to see ToLiss go ahead and complete that. Everything else seemed to be pretty decent. I don't know exactly what software version they're modeling here. I know it's definitely an older one, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that because I understand it takes time to model something as you create or develop it. But just the small things. Secondary flight plan. Let's clean up this 2D pop-up. Let's make it the same. Either change the 3D module over here, have this be a true 319 McDo, or make this pop-up have the same keys. It just To the untrained eye, you probably wouldn't even notice it, but for people who's got thousands of hours in the Airbus, you're going to notice that right away. Like, what the heck? That's two different McDo boxes. And of course, the init B, 0 fuel weight CG, these need to be flipped around. And or the secondary flight plan, of course. Other than that, everything else looks pretty decent. One thing I did love is I could insert holds in the ToLiss 319. In the Flight Factor Airbus, as soon as you insert a hold, it crashes to desktop. So I was mentioning that in that other video. Yeah, as we go through here, you can also see the alternate or company route is not amber. That is correct. My secondary flight plan page, here it is. I can do secondary flight plans, and I can run it just like the real aircraft. So I'm very happy to see that the secondary flight plan is modeled. The init page B, it is correct. We have 0 fuel weight and then the 0 fuel weight CG. You can see that that is correct. It is flip-flopped in the ToLiss 319. Now I don't know if there is an older version McDo that they were modeling that had it that way. I've never seen it that way, but as far as authenticity, especially as to what I fly, this McDo in the Flight Factor Airbus is definitely more accurate and portrays the real thing instead of the ToLiss, and that's basically just solely off of some small little errors, like the init page B right here, the secondary flight plan. I can use that in this. On the progress page, I can put in the runways right here. I don't get an error message like I did in the ToLiss as well. So I'm happy to see that. That definitely is correctly simulated. Alright guys, looking at the overhead now for the ToLiss 319. As you can tell, it's pretty well modeled. I mean, I don't have any problems with this at all. I've got my 8 ears aligning right now. Nice little wear and tear on the switches there. It's definitely, let's go ahead and switch over. I'm definitely okay with this modeling. I think it's up to standards. What I do love is I can use my ground control CVR push button. I know in the Flight Factor version you can't use this push button, it's grayed out. Also the calls buttons don't work in the Flight Factor one, but they work in the ToLiss one to a certain extent. To get the cabin ready, if you do a forward cabin call, it will change your lower ECAM and it'll say the cabin is ready. So that's cool to have. All the other buttons here are pretty much usable. Yeah, so that is nice to see. I really like to see that. I know a lot of people don't even know what this push button is for, so I'll explain that quickly. The ground control recorder basically activates the cockpit voice recorder when the aircraft is on the ground when we're doing our pre-flight setup. So the aircraft will actually, let me back up a second. The aircraft will automatically activate the CVR after first engine start. But we want to have everything recorded prior to engine start, so that's why we press this ground control recorder push button. Doesn't really do anything in the sim world other than illuminates blue and it looks right, but as someone who's been flying the Airbus for quite a while, when I look up at my overhead and I want to make sure it looks like what I see in real life, and this button is blue when I'm on the ground, I'm glad I can do that here in the ToLiss 319. Everything else looks good. Your fire test push buttons work. Everything that I've run through work just fine. One other thing that bothers me a little bit, this audio switching panel is in Captain 3. I don't know why it's in Captain 3. It should be in normal. So I'd like to see that change to normal position. The third radio here, this needs to be, number one, needs to be on. This PA push button or PA audio needs to be out and halfway on the volume. Now, if you look down here, you can see when something is on, it illuminates, right? And that's true to the real aircraft. The reason that this needs to be out and on is so we can record the passenger announcements and the PAs from the flight attendants on the cockpit voice recorder. If this push button is not out or illuminated, that means we're not recording the flight attendants. And if there were an emergency, we need to hear what they were doing. So I'd like to see that fixed as well. Give me full overhead functionality like the real aircraft. But other than that, everything else looks pretty good. All your lights work, and you can do your tests, and I'm happy with that. So that is the overhead review on the ToLiss 319. So now let's go ahead and look at the overhead on the Flight Factor Airbus. As you could tell, it's also very well modeled. It's a newer type of ADIR system, so you can see we have a different ADIRS panel here. As we go through our flow, let me just go ahead and get everything up. The calls button is not functional, rain repellent is not functional. None of this stuff I compress, including this ground control push button, which if you watch the ToLiss part of this video, I explain that. That bothers me. This is all good. Everything looks good. Cannot control any of these buttons up here. And let's go ahead and get these ADIRS aligning. I'm not going for proper procedure right now. We're just testing it. So that all looks good. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the ECAMs, upper and lower ECAM, and then we're in the ToLiss 319 still. And I've got my flashlight on, that's why you see this little light going around here. All the status pages are pretty decent. I'm not seeing any major discrepancies. Everything looks to be working. It was really cool. I tested this the other day, the hydraulics, and turned off the yellow electric hydraulic pump and watched the PTU take over and fill up or pressurize the yellow system when I was single engine taxiing. So that was really nice to see the level of depth that ToLiss is taking on this 319, which is something that I was not expecting. I was expecting the ToLiss 319 to be much more of a light simulation. At least that's what I heard through the grapevine. That is not true, in my professional opinion. I find that they really did go to great lengths to simulate quite a bit of stuff here. Fuel page, everything looks modeled. If someone's familiar with flying Airbuses, maybe longer than I have, I'm getting a lot of boxed messages in not only the ECAM, but on the ND. Now, normally when you get a boxed item, that means it's been changed. So I'll be flying around and I have multiple things boxed below the top of my FMA, which I'll get to in a minute. But I don't think that's accurate unless it's a really old software version that might have been the case. But it's really neither here nor there. It's not a big deal. It doesn't affect the way the aircraft flies. It's just something I noticed. I wasn't exactly sure. I'm pretty sure this fuel on board is boxed, though. Anyway, moving on. APU page looks good. They've simulated the flap open. I don't know if you've been following my last videos or anything, but the proper operation for the APU is to turn on the APU power switch right here, wait for the flap open message to illuminate before you can press the start button. That way we know that the APU has full oil or it doesn't have a low oil. Essentially, when you power up the APU computer, it runs a self-test, and if you just start the APU right after you hit the power push button, you won't be able to know if there's low oil in the APU or not. So they modeled that correctly. That works good. The condition pages. This was something a little interesting. Switch my views around here. Get the bleed working. The trim air valves work, but extreme speeds. So you'll notice here as I power on the APU bleed, we're going to get everything warming up here, or cooling down. But a quick overview of what this page is showing you is you've got hot air coming in through the air conditioning system, right? Then we have what's called trim air valves, and they decide how much hot air is going to pass through the valve into the mixing unit and into the cabin. So we have our temperatures, 25, 28, 28, and then we have the temperature of the air going into the cabin. So we can tell we're actually cooling the cabin right now. But watch what happens when I want to warm up the cabin. You see how fast that trim air valve jumps up? That's inaccurate to an extent, obviously. What should happen is when I increase these temperatures, I should see these trim air valves slowly open more to the hot side, H, and then the temperatures increase, and then obviously the cabin would increase. So I'm not sure I'm sure it's just a beta thing or something that's not complete yet, but just bring it to their attention. It does work. You can change the temperature. I like to fly with the cockpit a little bit warmer. Everyone likes to fly with the cockpit freezing for some reason. It's kind of funny to see those valves jump, but they are actually working. So again, I am impressed with how they are modeling it at a much greater depth than I was aware of. So that was just the condition page, things I noticed. Door page. This is pretty cool. So the doors actually work when you leave them on auto mode in the ISCS, the Interactive Simulation Control System. Let's go ahead and find the doors here, ground services, there we go. When you leave them in auto, they actually work according to their own schedule, and if you... Oh, there's my landing gear. Once you've arrived at the gate and you shut down the engines and the beacon light, the doors will begin to open at pretty accurate representation. I mean, you wait there for a couple minutes, simulating the rampers going up, and the aft cargo will open, and forward cargo, the passenger door actually opens. So that's pretty neat to see, especially when you're getting ready for before start, and you have that doors and windows item in your checklist. You actually got to come down here and check, hey, did everything close up? And it sure did. So that was really neat. I'm glad to see that. That little feature, that was really cool. I really liked that. Wheel page. I didn't see any discrepancies here. Everything looked good. I will say I am extremely pleased with their brake temperature simulation. Those that fly the Airbus know that hot brakes is just a normal thing on the Airbus. It just happens. Okay, sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes it's pilot error, of course, or but a lot of times if you're landing hot and heavy and it's a hot day, you're going to get hot brakes if you want to get off the runway and not go into the dirt. So I'm very pleased to see how they modeled the hot brakes, or the brake temperatures, and they actually gave us little brake fans that work too. The flight factor brakes, when the aircraft first was released, I thought they did a great job of simulating the temperature, but in recent patches, I find it almost impossible to get hot brakes. I can land a nearly fully loaded 320 on the flight factor Airbus and stand on the brakes to aircraft stop, and I taxi off the runway, go to the gate, and my brake temperatures are about 200. So that is not how that works. A lot of times you're feathering the brakes because you're fighting that urge. Okay, I don't want to get hot brakes, but I want to make this taxiway, etc., etc. ToLiss did a great job in their brake temperature simulation. Hands down to that, to them for that. Flight controls. I don't believe this is all orange all the time, but I'll revisit that. There were no discrepancies really there. I will talk about the aileron droop and what's known as the Florence kit. I know there is a way to talk about that. I'll get it figured out and I'll show you here in a second. I'll talk about that. No discrepancies there. Last thing with the ECAMs, which kind of bothered me on the ToLiss 319, is this all push button right here. This all push button. What I should be able to do is click this push button and it will cycle through each system every time I press the all button. So a lot of times when you get up into cruise, the first thing you do is you got to go through a systems check. And what I do is I just come over here and I just tap the all button as it cycles through. Without that feature, I got to actually go touch each one, which is not a big deal, but come on, you've modeled almost all these buttons. Why not just get that all button working there? The recall button does not work yet either. I don't know if that's something they plan to fix in the future or add in the future. I hope they do. What the recall push button does is anytime you've had a failure and you've cleared it out, if you press and hold the recall button, it will bring up that last failure so you can see what it was if you need to write it up or something. So, not a huge deal, but I'd like to see it modeled. You've done all this work down here anyway, just go ahead and finish it off. That's pretty much all I have for the lower ECAM. and the systems pages. So we'll go ahead and continue this video here on the next screen. Alright, as we look at the ECAM pages here, the lower ECAM now in the flight factor, you can see right off the bat I mentioned the all push button was not modeled in the ToLiss aircraft, and you can see why I like it. Here we go. So you can just press all and you can cycle through all of these systems pages from the ToLiss. So, and this is correct, all amber, that is correct. So very similar. It's hard to tell. The 319 and ToLiss, the ToLiss 319 font, I don't know, it didn't seem like it looked as good as the Flight Factor font. I don't know if they're using a different font or something. As far as real depiction, this is pretty darn real. I can't. As far as fonts go and size and everything, it looks much more clean than the ToLiss for some reason. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do appreciate their work on modeling the upper and lower ECAM very, very well. I want to show you guys the startup procedure. So let's go ahead and go to ignition start. I got bleed pressure, 41 psi. We got a great APU. All the red amber X's go away. That's good. Now, I'm going to get rid of the APU bleed. Let's watch the pressure bleed off. Now, watch what happens when I turn the APU bleed on. Instant pressure. I hate seeing that because that's not accurate at all. And a lot of new guys that come into the Airbus in the real world, when they go to start the engines and they go, okay, APU bleed on, engine master mode, to ignition start, and then they go ahead and flip the switch. But what happens is this pressure takes a while to build up. And when you go ahead and start without pressure, you're going to get a fault message that says no start pressure. So Flight Factor does the same thing. It's just instant pressure. I like to see a slow accumulation of pressure. Simulated engine startup here now on the Flight Factor 320. I go ahead and turn this to ignition start. Let's check our bleed. Look at that, that's very nice. I stand corrected on the video I just did on the ToLiss. I didn't realize that they had that fixed. That's good, nice, steady buildup of pressure. I like to see that. Sounds overall. So I did pay the $5 or $9 for the additional sound pack, and you can see that here. I have the IA engine sound pack. Now, to be honest with you, I think I only did 1 or 2 flights before I bought the sound pack for the IAE engines because I was pretty displeased with the default sounds. I got the sound pack sounds, and I can tell you I'm still pretty displeased with them. They're definitely better if I move around the cabin here. But they're not BSS, let's be honest. If you're familiar with BSS, Blue Sky, I believe it's Blue Sky Studios, they make some of the best sound packs I have ever heard. And when I fly the Flight Factor Airbus A320, it is so realistic with the BSS sound pack, I don't notice any discrepancies, to be honest with you, from the real aircraft, other than the PTU sound, which I know they're coming out with an option now that has pilot mode or something like along that lines, and enhanced mode. And pilot mode means basically you won't hear the PTU or flaps or anything like that. But on their sound pack for the Flight Factor Airbus, I think you only hear the PTU, don't even really hear the flaps anyway, which I actually like hearing the PTU. I mean, you know what's happening in the back, so it's kind of neat to hear it up front. I like that sound, especially if you're just a flight simmer and you have flown in the back of Airbuses and you've heard that sound before. Yeah, you want to hear it up front too, right? Because it gives you that extra immersion, even though it may not be exactly realistic to what is happening at the front. To you, it's realistic because you know that that sound is actually going on, and you can hear it again in your sim. So I don't have a problem with the PTU sound up front in the cockpit. I like it. It's added immersion. But as far as the sounds on on the ToLiss 319, I'm not sold on it. Okay, I'll let you look at my sound settings. Maybe there's something that I can configure differently. I got an audio visual. Here we go. So I've got the master volume all the way up. I got the engine volume all the way up. And, I can turn that down. That's probably more realistic there. But the 319, in general, is extremely loud compared to the 320 and especially the 321. The 321 is virtually silent up front. The 319 is loud. Okay, you're sitting much closer to the engines, and it's an older airplane typically, so everything rattles. There's not as good seals everywhere. You can see, I mean, here's the pilots and the engines right here, so you're pretty darn close. I'm not sold on the sound pack. That is one thing I don't know if it's. I really wish that BSS would do a 319 sound pack, or to be honest with you, if they could just get their last one from Flight Factor and have it work with ToLiss, I think it would be fine. The sounds are something I'm not 100% sold on. And let's go ahead and do a takeoff here, and you can hear the whole thing for yourself. So I'll do a series of takeoffs. I'll do a cockpit takeoff, a window takeoff, and an external takeoff. Alright, so auto brakes, max, takeoff config, checked. We'll get that on auto and TARA. Everything looks good. Now this is what's cool. So cabin says check. Now some aircraft have this, some don't. It depends on what your company, if they pay for it or not. But what we can do is you just come up here and hit the calls button. Boom. Cabin's ready. And that would be pretty realistic, because we make an announcement, flight attendants prepare for takeoff, and then they should be okay. That's their sign. So we got everything all green. We're ready to go. Let's listen to the sounds. Alright, so as you can see, that was an internal sound for takeoff. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. I don't feel immersed. I'll just say that. I don't feel immersed. Another thing that really bugs me is the landing gear. When I put that landing gear up, if you listen to the next video I'm going to show you, the BSS takeoff, the landing gear makes a very distinctive clunk. As soon as you bring that switch up, that's the hydraulics releasing and the gear, the pressure releasing and the gear being able to retract into the wells. So take a look at that, and let's do a window view of our takeoff. Alright, we will do an exterior view from the front, because if I go from the back, it's pretty much just wind noise, so I find this is the best angle here. Go ahead and have a listen. All right, so from the exterior, it's not very immersive to me. It's almost there. I'd say it's probably about maybe 60 to 70% there, what I expect, but I just don't. I'm not feeling it. Also, when you notice that flyby view, as soon as you go to the exterior, you have full sound of engines right away. It's not like you hear an aircraft in the distance and it gradually gets louder, 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 and then it's right in your face and then flying by. You don't have that. And this is the $10 sound pack add-on. So again, not too pleased with the exterior sounds. The window view sound is probably the best of the three, but I'll let you guys decide for yourself. And I'm going to go ahead and set up for some maneuvers, and I'll see you on the next screen. Okay, in this set we're going to do a steep turn comparison, and I'm not going to do it exactly by procedure wise. I want to demonstrate some fly-by-wire modeling. So we'll go ahead and disconnect the autopilot. You have to bind it, which I'm not too upset with. So I've got that disconnected. I'm going to go ahead and leave the auto thrust on, and what we're going to do is we're going to go flight directors off, and I'm going to go track FPA, which will give me what's called the bird. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Airbus, some of its protections and stabilities is, I'll try to do a brief overview on that. So the first thing is the fly-by-wire modeling in the bank category. So the Airbus will essentially hold your last input up to 33 degrees angle of bank, and then it will hold that position. Now, if you get bumped by wind or something, it's going to continue to roll. It's not going to bring you right back to exactly where you were, but it should hold your bank angle right about 33 degrees. You are demanding G-load and roll rate with the side stick in the Airbus. You're not, doing bank angle. You're not doing bank rate of turn and or bank angle. It's G-load and roll rate is what you're commanding from fly-by-wire computers. So as I roll into a left bank here, I'll go right to about 30 degrees, and you can see, a little bit short, it went ahead and it's holding me right there about 28. Let's go up a little bit. Now, one thing it should have auto trim as well up to 33. So you can see that's pretty darn good. I'm completely hands off the stick right now, and the aircraft is flying happily in a 33 degree bank. Now, if we go in excess of 33 degrees, the aircraft should return us back down to 33. So let's go ahead and move it to 40 degrees bank. And you can see the auto pitch trim is inhibited there, so I got to compensate. And I let go of the stick, and it brings me right back to 33 degrees angle of bank. That's pretty good. I'm impressed with that. Very similar to the how Flight Factor has theirs modeled as well. They both nailed this category. I'm going to go all the way to 40 degrees. So when you execute steep turns, you got to go all the way to 40 degrees angle of bank, and you have to learn to compensate for pitch because you no longer have the auto trim working when you're at this degree of bank. And I can tell, so when I'm at 40 degrees of bank, I have to manually compensate for pitch, which is very accurate to the real aircraft. So I'll go ahead and let go of the stick. Let's see, it comes right back to 33. Beautiful. and we'll go ahead and I'll take command, roll out, get back to 5,000 feet. So that's not necessarily a steep turns maneuver, but that just kind of demonstrates the bank angle stability that the Airbus has built in, and they've done a good job of modeling that. If you want to learn how to do steep turns, I have a video on my channel that explains the actual procedure for steep turns. But right now we're kind of just doing a fly-by-wire test. The next thing I want to test is our high-speed protection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn the autopilot back on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just ram the throttles into toga. So what that's going to do is it's going to increase the speed of the aircraft until we hit V&E. And then when we get to our protections, it should actually pitch up and prevent the aircraft from overspeeding. And there you go, autopilot disconnect, and the high-speed protection is kicked in, and you can tell it's induced a climb. I've completely hands off the stick, and it's not allowing the aircraft to exceed into V&E. Very nicely done. All right, I have control. High-speed protection. There we go, master warning, autopilot off, and there the aircraft goes, preventing us from an extreme high-speed situation, pitching the aircraft up. Okay, so now that we're up here at 11,000 feet level and autopilot's back on, let's demonstrate a stall series. So what I want to do is I'm going to dial this speed all the way back, and we'll test out these slow speed protections and stabilities, make sure that they are correctly simulated. Now, as I have scrolled the speed back down to 100 knots, it's as low as you can scroll it to. What should happen as we get slow here is you're going to see VLS, which is the single amber line coming up. This means that is the lowest selectable speed for the autopilot. So with the autopilot on, which it is, the aircraft should not decelerate past VLS, which looks to be right about, what's that, 192 knots or something like that. So we will see how that is modeled here.
Traffic, traffic.
Well, that's not good.
Traffic, 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 traffic.
Alright, and you can see power's come back in, and we're holding VLS. Even though I've selected 100 knots, aircraft's holding VLS perfectly. That is how it should be. That is correct simulation. Very good. Now we're going to take auto thrust out of the equation, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the thrust levers to idle. Now what should happen is as we reach V alpha prot, which is this tiger tail, the autopilot should disconnect. Okay, that was a little premature, but I get what they're trying to do, so we'll note that. Premature disconnect on the autopilot. So that is pretty good. Let's go ahead and reduce the auto thrust. Let's go ahead and turn the auto thrust off. Bring the thrust levers to idle. Now we should have autopilot disconnect at V alpha prot minus a few degrees. So you can remember the ToLiss had disconnected prematurely. This is more accurate here. This is correct. We are in V alpha prot. There's some protections. Where's my autopilot? There it is. Autopilot kick off. Boom, recover from the stall. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go ahead and put the aircraft into alternate law. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do some switching here. Okay, so now you can tell the aircraft's in alternate law. You can tell that by the amber X's on the ND. And I should turn these flight directors off. Okay, there we go. So the aircraft's in alternate law. In alternate law, the aircraft can stall. But I still have a protection in slow speed flight. I should have an automatic pitch trim down as I induce a stall. So I'm going to bring the thrust levers to idle. I'm going to extend flaps 1, simulating a departure stall on takeoff. And I'm going to just pitch up. Pitching up for about 1,000 feet per minute here. I'm going to hold that. Now what should happen is the aircraft should pitch down to prevent a stall. Okay, so I'm not getting any pitch down moment in alternate law. So that is not correct. Alright, let's go ahead and extend flaps 1. Now we are going to put the aircraft into alternate law, just like we did in the ToLiss Airbus. And we are going to test the slow speed stability here again. We should have, I'm going to go ahead, thrust levers are at idle, we're in alternate law. I'm going to pitch up for right about 1,000 feet per minute. And what should happen is I should get a counter of the aircraft. The aircraft should attempt to override me and nose down, even in alternate law. So let's see if that happens here. It was absent in the ToLiss 319. So I'm getting slower. I'm pulling more and more aft stick, trying to hold right about 1,000 feet per minute in the climb. So you can see my speed tape is missing. That's not accurate. I need to have that speed tape there. I'm full aft stick. And there we go. The aircraft is overriding me and pushing it down on alternate law. That was the fly-by-wire modeling. So that is correct. That is nicely modeled. That's a nice change. Let's go ahead and lower the landing gear, put the aircraft into direct law. Extend flaps 2. So use man pitch trim. We are now in direct law. And I'm going to go ahead and get the flaps all the way to full, simulating and approach the landing stall. So now you can see it's much more sensitive on the pitch because I have a direct relationship between the side stick and the deflection of the elevator. So I have a direct relationship in direct law. So I'm going to go ahead and simulate. We should get a synthetic stall, and the aircraft will stall in direct law. Okay, I'm not getting any stall warning. That's not good. The aircraft is clearly stalled. I'm not getting any stall warning. So they're missing that. Let's go ahead and recover. Alright, so that's not correct either. I should not have a stall warning there. I should have an auto pitch down, which would be the first sign of a stall, and then I would recover from that point. So they're missing a step there in their modeling. Let's go ahead and continue on with our procedures here. I'm going to go ahead and go flaps to 3, flaps full. I'm going to put the landing gear down. When I put the landing gear down, I should go into direct law, use man pitch trim, and I'm bringing the thrust levers to idle. So that's the sign of a stall, and you recover. Now as I go into, I don't know why everything just decided to come back on like that. That's interesting. Everything re-engaged. Flight directors, the open climb, go around track, everything engaged there. I did not do any of that. That's not entirely accurate. positive rate, gear up. I should go back into alternate law. Let's go ahead and get everything back on here. Rebuild the automation. All right, so if it comes down to the stalls, the flight factor Airbus has actually had a great improvement through recent updates, and I can see much more accurate representation of the alternate and direct law modeling in this Airbus compared to the ToLiss 319. Even though it's a 319 versus 320, the same laws apply. It's still an Airbus, so it should still have those protections. That was really neat to see that. Good job, flight factor. That is very nice. Okay, so I've got everything recovered as it should. I put the aircraft into alternate law, and now I should be out of alternate law, but I'm not. What's interesting is I found this bug out earlier, is when I go to extend the landing gear, at least when I did last time, it put me back into normal law. So below 250, let's go ahead and drop the gear. Let's see if it does it again. And there it goes. I'm back into normal law. So that's a little incorrect as well. I should not have to drop the gear again to put the aircraft back to normal law. But that's neither here nor there. You would never intentionally put, well, I shouldn't say never, but 99% of the time you're not going to intentionally put the aircraft into normal or into alternate law and then into direct law, unless you had some sort of failure. So that needs some work on their low end of the spectrum there. Their stall series is not correct. But the high speed was good, and the bank is good. So for a 60, how much does this plane cost? $60-something. I'm not disappointed. I mean, how many people are going to get in this thing and go practice stalls and all that stuff? So it's, I understand that it's probably very difficult to model accurately, especially when you get into the fine details of Airbus flight control logic and the protections and stabilities that the aircraft has to keep you out of a stall. All right, that's going to wrap up the maneuvers validation. We're going to go ahead and do an approach. All right, as I'm getting set up for the ILS into Seattle again, I've noticed another thing that's bothering me is I should be able to put Seattle, KSEA, and then the runway 16 center, just like that, and I should be able to put it right here, my bearing distance. It says format air, though that's incorrect. That should allow me to put the runway in there. Alright, I'm going to set up for an auto land. We're going to see how this airplane handles an auto land. Okay, one thing that's nice about the ToLiss 319 MiG-2, even though it has some of its issues that I've already outlined, is the ability to insert a hold. So right now I'm going to select anvil, I'm going to select hold, and what's really cool is I can just come up here and hit computed, and what that does is it basically takes my inbound course and flips it around into a standard hold with right turns. And I can go ahead and go back to my flight plan, insert that, boom, and now the aircraft is going to hold over anvil. That is very handy and often overlooked, especially for if you fly your airplanes in the sim, anything like I do, where I might set up a long flight and go walk away. So when you come back, you find yourself very high and out of profile. So what I like to do is set up a hold, descend in the hold, and then shoot the approach. Now, in the flight factor MiG-2, when I go to insert a hold, I get an automatic crash to desktop. And the last time that I checked, which was relatively recent, I believe that was a confirmed bug and had not been remedied yet. So if you are watching this video and there is a remedy for it, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know how to remedy the holding crashed desktop via the McDo in the Flight Factor Airbus. Just another sound clip here. I'm going to go ahead and do a flyby view. So the engines are at idle, but I want you to notice as soon as I start the flyby, you can still hear. It's almost like there's no audio change from the aircraft far away to being up close. These are the cabin views and sounds at idle. Alright, here's another thing that I have noticed in the ToLiss 319 that is bugging me, is the extension of the flaps. Their speed that they extend at is, to me, extremely fast. You guys let me know what you think about this. That just looks very unnatural to me. You can see in the retraction sequence. Oh. So you tell me what you think. Okay, here we are entering the hold over Anvil, and we're going to set up for our approach. We're doing a Cat 3 ILS. I've got no DH set up. We're going to see how the ToLiss 319 handles an Auto Land. One other thing I wanted to point out is this terrain on ND. It's modeled out to, I believe, 40. So that looks really good. As soon as I go to 80, oh, that looks a little better. But you can see I started to get this line, and now I don't know out to 160, and here's the box. So I believe, it is my opinion now, that this might be a X-plane limitation, because I noticed Flight Factor has the same problem. They don't model the terrain mode out past, I believe Flight Factor doesn't model it out past 40. We'll have to look in the next video. But it's kind of annoying to me that I can't go. I should be able to go at 320 and have terrain on my ND, so not a big deal, I guess, but it may be an X-plane limitation. If you guys know it's an X-plane limitation or something, I'd love to hear it. Let me know why they can't model that out further. While we're speaking about that really quick, the weather radar, the switches work. However, I cannot get the weather radar to work. Maybe I'm missing something. If you're flying the ToLiss 319 and it has and the radar's working for you, let me know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, which I find hard to believe since I fly this plane all the time. But I have it on one. I've tried System 1 as well, and I don't get any. I should have a scan zone right here. I don't have any of that, so we'll let that be for now. All right, here we are in the hold. I'm going to go ahead and do an immediate exit. Boom. And you can see it draws a line right back around. So that's cool. That's true to the real aircraft, and I like how they've got that modeled. So I entered a hold. I was able to descend in the hold, exit the hold, and that's going to take me right back into the approach. All right, so another bug that I just found out is I'm sitting here level with the speed brakes out. And the aircraft's maintained 180 knots, so I should be getting an ECAM saying speed brake, and this should be flashing at me. So that is incorrect as well. That needs to be remedied. That is a big deal. Lets you know if the speed brakes are out. The aircraft's trying to maintain speed. So we'll go ahead and retract them. Aircraft's doing a good job lining up. So we're not going to intervene at all. We're going to let it do an auto land. Go ahead and push for managed speed. Lower the landing gear. Arm the spoilers. VFE next, minus 10. Flaps 3. I could hear a little bit of flap there, and that's because I have the sound enabled for that. If you go to the ISCS, you can do sound fading, and you're supposed to not hear anything that's not realistic up front, but it doesn't bother me. So flaps full. Alright, so when we do our landing check, you can see we still have cabin signs blue. Come up here, hit the calls button, cabin ready. That's a really cool feature to me. I really like that. It's small, but it kind of brings you into the realm of, it's realistic. Did you make your PA when you come at the final approach fix, 5 times prepare for landing, whatever your procedure may be. I like that they have that. We have a status message. What the heck is that? Increased fuel consumption. Interesting. We're going to talk about failures here in a minute. Right now, let's let the aircraft do its auto land. It's at its approach speed. It's following the glide slope beautifully. Have a listen outside. Might probably just my computer every time I switch to the outside view. I lose the landing gear. Okay, here we go. 750, we had landing inhibit, that's correct. By about 350 feet, we should get a land green.
500.
There it is, 350 feet, land green. Now we should see flare mode.
300. 200. 100. 50. 40.
There it is.
30. Retard.
Acceptable landing. Did it just bounce? Wow. Here comes the reverse thrust. .70 knots, idle on the reverse. That's what bothers me. I come to idle, listen to my reverse sounds. That doesn't seem very good. Manual brakes. We'll take it off the runway here. Autopilot disconnect. Always disconnect your autopilot before you steer off the runway with the tiller, or else you may end up in the grass. The aircraft will track the localizer even after you're on the ground. So when you go ahead and move the tiller, you make the turn and you let go, in real life, that aircraft's going to zap right back to the localizer, unless your autopilot's disconnected. Alright, let's take a look at the exterior view of the Auto Land on the ToLiss. Let's see how well it does. And now you can really understand what I'm talking about in the sound series. See how loud the engines are, even I'm this far away from the aircraft? I don't find that acceptable for an additional sound add-on. So, a little bit of a bounce there for the Auto Land. A little sketchy. Ooh, look at that. And the reverse thrust for the nose wheel came down. That's not good. That could be pilot induced, pilot air right there. Really sounds true to life. Alright, here comes the localizer and the glide slope. We're not going to intervene. We're going to let it fly a Cat 3 Auto Land. We will compare it to the ToLiss Auto Land. you can see this one has a little bit different software. There is no cabin sign. You don't have to call them, even though these call buttons don't work, which bothers me. You don't have to call them. That's not part of the ECAM. That's not either incorrect or not correct. It's just the type of software that this aircraft model is running. This is actually true to what I fly 99% of the time. We don't have the software for cabin calls. I think maybe our Neos do, but it's been a while since I've flown a Neo. Alright, everything is down to land. I'll try to do some flyby views since we can't hear the sound. Since we can't hear the sound in replay. Land green, 350 feet.
300. 200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Retard. Retard 5.
Whoa, look at that landing there. Okay. Apparently. Wow. Apparently something happened there that they did not like. Airbus did not like that Auto Land. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but I can tell you that that's not a usual occurrence. I should have been in the cockpit during touchdown. Alright, regardless, let's go ahead and exit the runway and stow the reversers here. Definitely had something funky going on there on the touchdown. I apologize. Trying to compare the Auto Land. Alright, if you take a look at our wheels, even after that crazy landing where I was skidding around, our wheel temps we have a slightly different indication, which is not either right or wrong. This is green, so that means they are the hotter of the wheels. The hottest wheel will be green with this type of indication versus the ToLiss, which have the white lines. Now, look at my brakes. 140. I was standing on the brakes the entire rollout, and that doesn't look very accurate to me. This is what I'm talking about, and this is what I love. Brakes hot, ECAM. Now, the only problem with this, you still have a little incorrect situation going on here. This needs to be depicted correctly, so they're all exactly the same. I don't think I've ever seen that. What would happen is when one brake is hotter than the other brake, you're going to get a double white line here, which shows you the hottest brake. Also, there we go. So these should be double white lines here because they're hotter than the right side. Now, also what's incorrect is since we have a brakes hot indication above 300 degrees Celsius, these need to be an amber. They are not an amber. So they've almost got it. They got good brake temperature, wear, whatever, But they need to fix this. They need to get this correctly simulated. So that's my brake spiel. The last thing that we're going to touch on the ToLiss before we hop into the flight factor is I want to talk about the ISCS Interactive Simulation Control System. This has all kinds of things that you can adjust. You can load and save situations. You can auto save your flight if you have a problem with stability and it's crashing on you. Here's your loading screen. When you select a runway, you do your performance test. It gives you your numbers, your flex. You could select what flap you want to use for takeoff. Quick refuel, defuel, everything is through here. And it's really well done. It feels complete to me. It feels like it's working. You can turn on external air and power. Low pressure air, this is for temperature controlling the cabin without the AP running, and high pressure air is to start the engines. I haven't tested these yet. I'm not sure if they work as intended, but I know the external power does. One thing I would like to see is there is no, I know we're not at the gate, but there's no external trucks or anything that pull up to the aircraft. So hopefully that's something they'll add in the future with the ISCS, that when you have the ground power, you know, have a cord run in or something. It just adds some immersion, especially if you want to compete with the big boys in the flight simulation world. It's the small things make all the difference to me. So I'd like to see some trucks in the future, and that might be what this box is for here. So maybe they're working on it. This is the door auto thing that I was talking about earlier. So with the aircraft shut down, my beacon's still on, so you're not supposed to touch the aircraft. Let's see, if I turn the beacon off here, I'm pretty sure the doors will begin to open up after a predetermined amount of time. While we wait, let's go ahead and go back to the ISCS. I can view this. Oh, there we go. I'll just close it. So the beacon's off, and aft cargo is opening, which at a 319, you'd open the aft bin first. Well, pretty much in any aircraft, you always check to make sure the tail's empty first. But small things, this is what I'm talking about. This is a small detail that I love it. I mean, beacon's off. Now the ground crew can go ahead and touch the aircraft, and they open the correct door first. Now we've got the 1L door is open and disarmed. Beautiful. And then they eventually come over here and open the forward cargo. Look at that. So those are the small things I'm talking about that I absolutely love. I had to do nothing. I don't sit there and open the doors. It's done like it should be, and that adds so much immersion to me. And I can only imagine if they ended up getting little ground trucks and stuff that came up in addition to the auto doors, that would be the cherry on the top. I love that about this aircraft. Very well done. The next thing that I'm going to talk about, fault scenarios and ejection. I love this almost as much as I love the ground service doors situation. So to me, in this day and age of X-Plane, we've got some great modules coming out that have maintenance, tracking, and wear and tear, such as the Hot Start TBM 950, or is it 900? That I hear has incredible maintenance, tracking, and wear and tear. The FlyJ Sim series, the 737 and the 727, probably my favorite add-on is the 737 from FlyJ Sim, and the maintenance tracking that they have, you know, things break down over time, which is awesome. That gives me purpose to do something. If I get in the cockpit, why do I do a fire test? Is it because I expect that I'm going to have a fire on that flight? No, not necessarily. But I want to make sure everything is working. I want to do are the light bulbs working? Or, you know, is everything in conjunction? I do the annunciator lights test up here. There it is. Boom, annunciator lights test, make sure everything's working. Now, what FlyJ Sim does is they simulate even light bulbs burning out and everything, which is awesome. That's probably the reason why it's my favorite add-on. And it has that maintenance tracking. It gives you that feel of what you do matters. It's not every time I start up X-Plane, I'm getting in a brand new airplane where everything works all the time. I don't like that. So the next best thing to having a prolonged maintenance tracking system is this fault injection system here. And this is the first time I've seen this. And I have enabled random faults on. And if you can add a new fault. You can create whatever you want. I think there's up to 90 different faults, and you can select when they start. Now that's cool and all, especially for training, but the next best thing to having a prolonged maintenance tracking simulation, such as FlyJSim does, is this fault injection, which it's based on your flight time factor, mean time between faults. So if I read it in the manual, I think if I set this all the way up to 1,000, it means I'll have, I don't know, a fault every 0 to 10 hours or something like that. They recommend anything between 0, but they recommend, I think, 100 to 300, where not every single flight ends in an emergency landing. And I love that. I think that is great, because now not only do I have to kind of make sure everything's working, is that I can't just get up and leave and expect everything to go well. It is possible something that will go wrong. And I'll tell you, I've already had a small failure. It had something to do with the electrical DC essential bus, I think, went offline, which was no big deal, but it was something that I got to change or not change, I got to work with, and it was good to see that. So this fault injection system is probably the next best thing to a maintenance tracking program. What I would love to see is a maintenance tracking program, APU wear, generate all that stuff, have light bulbs go bad, kind of how FlyJSim does. I don't know if that's copyright or not, but either way, this fault injection, awesome. Add-ins, you can see I've got the sound pack installed. We've repeat the sound to death. Here's my sound settings. Maybe I need to adjust some a little bit more, but I've kind of found this is what I want, what I like, what I'm given. Another thing that's really cool is you can default to the co-pilot seat, and you can actually sit over here and fly the aircraft with your track IR and everything, which is awesome. I wish more airplanes did that. That's really cool. Strobe flash in the cockpit, that's if you're flying in clouds, and you can read about all this stuff if you end up buying it. It's nothing too pertinent here. Of course, your startup type, you can have the cold and dark, IRS aligned or auto aligned, joystick roll. If you don't have joystick twist and you don't have pedals, you can use roll as nose wheel steering on the ground, which is cool. A couple of flare law changes they've made. You see all this stuff here that you can set up. One thing that's cool, and I really like this, flying a lot of my time in the United States, our default transition altitude is 18,000 feet. When I get in, for instance, the Flight Factor Airbus, I think it defaults to 5,000 or whatever it is, which is true if you're in that country, but then I got to go through and change it every single time. Sometimes I forget it, and I get the little standard thing flashing at me. So this is cool. You can adjust your transition altitude to what it is for your country and where you are, your default standard. And again, that's right here, your transition altitude, 18,000 feet for North America. So that's pretty much all I have for the ToLiss 319. We're going to look at the flight factor stuff next. I'm going to try to get some of these side-by-side comparisons up. But overall, I mean, it's a good aircraft. It's got a lot of potential. I can tell you that. It has a lot of potential. I find the fly-by-wire is really good. It's right up there with Flight Factor's fly-by-wire, and it feels good to me. The 319 compared to the 320 is really hot rod, in comparison. It's the same airplane, but shorter. So you kind of get that hot rod feeling in the 319, and I kind of feel that in the ToLiss 319. So I think they did a good job with the drag coefficients and lift. I'm very impressed with this module. So I'm not going to tell you if you need to buy it or not buy it. You guys can kind of determine from your own what you want to get out of it. Obviously, somebody who flies the Airbus, like me, I want to have the most realistic Airbus add-on. So that's why I'm buying all these Airbus add-ons. All right, guys, that's all I got for now. We're going to look at the flight factor stuff, and we'll go from there. All right, we are on the ground now, and what I will say is we'll go ahead and talk. You can hear those passenger sounds, so let's go ahead and kill the sound conversation right now. With the BSS sounds, we have what's called Sound 3D. Now we have an option we can turn the people off if we want to. A couple things we can change. This is actually new to me. I was running the older version, the 1.1, I believe, of BSS. And to be honest with you guys, I prefer the older version. I think it was more balanced sound. Means I'll probably have to just do some tweaking within this panel. But I still would highly recommend the BSS sound pack over the default. For the blower fan alone, I mean, I can't fly around with that thing blaring all day. Alright. And like the ToLiss ISCS, or whatever it's called, we have in the flight factor a EFB. Through this EFB, we can refuel the aircraft. In order to do that, we got to call the fuel truck. We can unload passengers. By doing that, we have to call the air stairs before we can do any of that. And the same thing for cargo. Check this out. You hear that noise? That's BSS. That's that hydraulic pump working to open the cargo door. We can call the loader. And what's really nice, when we look outside, look at what we have. I know I'm out on a taxiway, but we got a fuel tank truck here, which is ginormous. I'd like to see a new model for the fuel truck itself, but I think we're going to have plenty of fuel to fuel this airplane, considering the fuel tank is about as large as the fuselage. Anyway, look at the nice baggage loader and the ground cart here, the air stairs. So this is what I was talking about with the ToLiss, when you have the doors auto opening, which I really love. If they had something like this to drive up to the aircraft as they do that, it would be the cherry on the top. So while I like the not randomness, but the auto door operation on the ToLiss, I like the external modeling on the flight factor. So it's a trade-off. What do you prefer to have? Now, I'm not sure. I don't have any of the ground services add-ons, and maybe you can, if you have those, then combining those with the ToLiss would be really great to have. Like I said, what I would like to see is this external modeling on the ToLiss auto doors, and I'd like to see these doors kind of work in auto, kind of how ToLiss did with the beacon, or turn the beacon off, the doors will open up, and all that stuff. So that is the external. For your performance, you have a much more formal looking type of setup here. You've got your weights, your dry operating weights, and you can adjust your CG by adjusting cargo. If I put more stuff in the front and the middle and I set that, I come back here to my performance and then my CG is moving. You have all your information, your zero fuel weight, your trim position. So this is a much more formal looking system compared to the ToLiss ISCS. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. It's just whatever you prefer. I mean, this one's definitely more formal. They have a nice little checklist here, which I haven't really gone through it. I use my own checklist that I use in the real aircraft, but I'm sure you can mess around with that. What is really cool, you can access the internet through your iPad, and you can pull up charts. So if I want to go air nav and go to Seattle, here we go. I can pull up a taxi chart right here. And I know I just exited off 16 Center. I think I'm on November. So that is pretty cool. In the real aircraft, we have EFBs, electronic flight bags, just like this, and we have all our charts loaded on them through a flight program that our company provides us with. So this is a great alternative. I mean, you don't even need those air rack or the air rack charts, whatever. You can just go to the internet and get the actual chart, and there you go. Awesome job with that. Settings, panels quality, you can change them. This should be a normal. I just had to do a reinstall of my airplane. The rain effect is really cool. It really eats your frames. But I'm sorry, that's reflection. Rain effect. I like to turn that on. It shows raindrops on the windshield, etc. Saving panel states. I don't mess around with this very much, but this is where you would do it. And there's a map. I'm not exactly sure what this page is for. I don't use this page. I think you can load up a flight plan map and it shows your flight plan and everything. But I just go to the browser and I use SkyVector. I fly around that way. But there's a lot of stuff in here that it's really cool. I think it feels more professional than the ISCS of the ToLiss 319. It doesn't mean it's better. It does the same thing. It does a few extra things, like we said, the browser and all that. But it is a little bit more professional. And it's a little more professional looking, because this is almost exactly what it looks like in the airplane. We have iPads, and we just put them on the iPad mount right here in the window, which is cool. A few other things. Thought I was able to... Oh, yeah. These lights work at night. That pretty much sums up the flight factor ground handling stuff. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in and checking out the head-to-head comparison. A couple of my notes that I'd like to say are: one, my biggest pet peeve between both aircraft is right here. Kilograms. Now I know a lot of you guys are like, oh, well, I use kilograms all the time. And I know 90% of the world uses kilograms, but a lot of Airbuses are operated in the United States, and I think American actually has the largest Airbus fleet per capita. So it would be nice to see that in pounds. I would love to see that in pounds. I know it takes a lot to change everything, but to be honest, if you're going to sell a $90 add-on, I want to be able to have pounds and kilograms, and I want to be able to flip between the two of them. If you're going to charge $90, I better be able to use pounds. As far as the systems go, when you compare them head-to-head, they're pretty darn close to each other. I actually went into it thinking that ToLiss was going to be far inferior with systems depth, and I found that to be not true. They actually model quite a bit, including the parking brake accumulator pressure here. Let's see if I can do that. So you can see my brakes are working. I mean, there's a lot of detail in both aircraft that I was not necessarily expecting. And that's a good thing. As far as recommending one over the other, the big question, right? ToLiss versus flight factor. To be honest with you, I would like to see them combine and make one awesome airplane. The flight factor Airbus has things missing that kind of bother me, especially for its price point. I know it's in beta, and I know it's being updated, although I feel like it's kind of fallen to the wayside behind their 767 updating and their 777 updating, I guess I heard now. I'd like to see them really polish this baby up. This 320, just like the 319, has so much potential. They've laid so much groundwork and so much potential. I would love to see them continue to update this aircraft. Wishfully, personally, I wish they'd do it a little bit faster. The 319 flies like a 319 compared to the 320. So they actually fly a little bit different, and it's modeled in X-Plane. The 319 from ToLiss flies like a little hot rod, and that's kind of how it is in the real world. When I get in a 319, it definitely feels more like a hot rod instead of hopping into a 320. Now, I do feel that the Flight Factor 320 almost feels more like a 321, the way it decelerates and accelerates. But that's either here nor there. There is a difference when in the sim when you fly them both, so that is cool. As far as ground performance goes, ground roll, ToLiss has that nailed. The Flight Factor 320 is definitely overpowered, I find, on the ground. Its takeoff distances are extremely short. Its takeoff runs are extremely short. And the landing distances are extremely short as well. And that's not even heating up the brakes, which is what worries me. So I think they need to revisit their ground handling and performance especially near the ground, on the ground. Um, that would definitely be something I would like to see them work on. As far as, you know, the external texturing, I think these aircraft are pretty much hand in hand. There's a guy who does external paints for the 320, goes by Delta Who, and he is probably the best painter I've ever seen. And he really adds some details. He puts some dirt behind the nacelles here. Really changes the wing and the inlets, I think, that make it looks really good. So I do like having that. This is not a Delta Who livery, unfortunately. But with that all being said, I'm going to leave it up to you guys on what aircraft you want to buy, one over the other. If you already have one, are you missing out by not having the other? I don't think so, not at this point. If the ToLiss 319 was completely finished up and, you know, fixed some system stuff, especially that slow speed stalling, we did that in the video, then I would say, well, maybe you ought to have both. But right now, if you have one over the other, you're really not missing much. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching this video. I know it's been a long one. I hope that it will help you in your decision if you're debating between the two aircraft or if you want to get the second one or not. If you have any questions or any things you would like to see done on a video in the Airbus, please send me a PM or leave a comment below, and I will try to get that done for you. Thanks for tuning in, guys.